Today's gospel is taken from Mark 7:24 through 37, the Syrophoenician woman's faith. From there he set out and went away to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know that he was there, yet he could not escape notice. But a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile of Syrophoenician origin. She begged him to cast a demon out of her daughter, and he said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying that, you may go, the demon has left your daughter." And she went home. She found the child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went by way of Sidon towards the Sea of Galilee in the region of Decapolis. They brought to him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay his hands on him. He took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and put his fingers into the man's ears and spat and touched his tongue. Then looked up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, "Ephathatha," that is, "be opened." His tongue was released and he spoke plainly. Then Jesus ordered them to tell no one, but the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. They were astounded beyond measure, saying, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." And this is the word of the Lord for the people of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Please be seated. As I switch programs. So we are in the season of creation, and part of the season of creation this year includes psalm readings. And actually, most Sundays include an Old Testament, a Psalm, a New Testament, and the Gospel. And today's Psalm was Psalm 24, and I just wanted to share it because it kind of adds to everything that we've taken in today. And it's a psalm of entrance into the temple of David.
This juicy pork loin.
The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world and those who live in it. For he has founded it on the seas and established it on the rivers.
With my potatoes.
Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord, and who shall stand in his holy place? Those who have clean hands and pure hearts, who do not lift up their souls to what is false and do not swear deceitfully. They will receive blessings from the Lord and vindication from God of their salvation. Such is the company of those who seek him, who seek the face of the God of Jacob. Salah. Lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord strong and almighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord of hosts is the King of glory. Salah. Every time I read that this week and last week and was preparing for today, all I could think of was the old hymn, "The King of Glory Comes." And what's worse is all I could think of was Stephen Colbert doing a dance to it. The season of creation, which we're celebrating now, originated in Australia and moved to North America and Europe. Hebrew scholar Norman Habel originated the season of creation and tested it out in the Uniting Churches in Melbourne. Now, the United Churches in Australia are sister churches to UCC. So it was tested out in 50 churches from 2001 and through 2005, and since then it has become a growing practice in churches all over the world. And the originator, Habel, writes that, accordingly, we are seeking to read the relevant Bible text also from the perspective of the earth and of its members of the earth community. Notice he said the earth community, not humanity. We had become aware that in the past, most interpretations of the text about creation, Earth or our kin on the planet, have been read from an anthropocentric perspective, meaning it's all about me. We've always read it from a very human-centered perspective. The task before us is to begin reading it also from the perspective of all creation. In other words, it isn't about us. It's about everything, living, breathing, animals, soil, air, water, and how we are part of it all, and it is all part of us. Pope Francis wrote, "Listen to the voices of creation." We need to learn. We need to learn to listen to the voices of nature and learn the language of the more than human life and the earth. If we learn how to listen, we can hear in the voice of creation a kind of dissonance. On the one hand, we can hear a sweet song and praise in our beloved Creator. On the other, an anguished plea lamenting our mistreatment of this, our common home. So many of us are not listening. We're not hearing creation cry out. We do not see the scars of destruction we're leaving behind. And I mean physical scars, where we clear-cut forests or we strip-mine mountains. In a radio interview, Evelyn Underhill, an author of Early Studies of Mysticism, said, quote, "But so many Christians are like deaf people at a concert. They study the program carefully, believe every statement made in the program, speak respectively of the quality of the music, but only really hear a phrase now and again. So they have no notion at all of the mighty symphony which fills the universe, to which our lives are destined to be their tiny contribution, and which is the self-expression of the eternal God." Okay, I'm going to say it was a poor choice of metaphor. And I can do a whole sermon on that for a few hours if you like, having worked in the deaf community for years. But do you hear what she's saying, actually? We can often be amid awe and wonder of creation, of God's gifts to us, but only glimpse a small part of the true splendor of the universe and this planet. I wonder how many times have I headed out to a place and just drove through the beauty and grandeur that is creation and ignored it because I'm going from point A to point B. And by the time I get to point B, I'm not even sure how I got there. I was just suddenly there. How many times have we stopped to pause just where we are and take in God's splendor and beauty? We really cannot change our behavior. We cannot really expect those around us to change their behavior until we truly appreciate what we are making the changes for. Thomas Keating, a Trappist priest and one of the developers of centering prayer, in their newsletter, he took part of his homily this week, and he reflects on beauty. He says, without some beauty in one's life as a regular experience or practice, most people will find it hard to maintain a spiritual level of peace or rest amid their very active lives. Life in the West, at least, is more active, more frantic, more noisy, more intrusive from information, most of which is negative. Thus, our poor little psyches are battered day and night with information, news, noise, and accelerated pace. He goes on to say, I'm reminded of a peace activist during the time of the Vietnam War. He was always getting himself in jail from trespassing on federal property. And so he would spend a good deal of the year in jail, which is perhaps one of the worst environments on the earth because it's always noisy, there is no beauty, easily at hand. It is an intense experience of human misery for most inmates. He used to say that he needed to come to Snowmass, the monastery, where the mountains are significant and beautiful and the colors are exquisite in so many directions. He said that he couldn't continue his demanding ministry of witnessing to peace and getting arrested without coming to the monastery to live the monastic life with us. Because, he said, I can't keep up this without some experience or proportion of beauty in my life. Just looking at the mountains is a relief for me. Keating goes on to say, being in an intentional community of love, service, simple work, fellowship, all of these things were refreshing for him and gave him not only the courage but the psychological strength. The psychological strength and resources to go back to bang on doors of federal or industrial military complexes of the sort or another. This really inspired me, Keating said, to realize that a place for beauty every day in our life is part of our spiritual journey. Because how can you know God, who is beauty itself, without some experience of it? We seldom appreciate fully our bonds and interconnections to all of creation around us. We do not slow down to become mindful of what is available and immediate to our senses and feel the gratitude for the gift of the earth. Feel gratitude for the gift of creation that provides the necessities for life. Air, water, soil, sun, the life around us. Few slow down to realize our interconnectedness unless we practice some sort of contemplative practice, intentionality, engaging with our immediate environment. Now that doesn't mean sitting in prayer and meditating all the time. That could be simply taking a hike a mile that way. It could simply mean walking around your block and discovering, hey, look, there's a pond behind us. That's where those ducks are going. Flying very low over my house, I'll mention. Nature has a sacramental presence of the Spirit and of the incarnated Christ. And Thomas Berry often quotes that the universe is not a collection of objects, but a communion of subjects. We swim in the presence of the life entangled with the Spirit. And during these next few weeks, we're going to be expanding upon the basic theme of the house rules for ecological transformation, as expressed in the Earth Justice Lectionary, which is in production stage, which you probably already heard about out there. Reverend Dr. Robert Shore-Goss, doesn't that sound official? My husband writes, there are a number of programs on the Home Garden Television Network that inspire DIY, transformation of your homes. The season of creation is DIY season for personal and social transformation. Many Christian denominations have set up guidelines to become a creation-centered church. Many of our churches have done this. The transformation. The season of creation, in one sense, functions as a capstone of the liturgical year, and that it focuses on an intense period of time, developing your skills for house renovation and to restoration of our house. This house. Not this house. This house. This house. We probably take better care of this sometimes than we do our own planet. I dust this off at least once a week. The house metaphor has been used to include the planet Earth, but it includes the way we also function with the Earth and cooperate with the Earth, or don't. It includes the administration, economy, sustainability, preservation of our house for habitation and for future generations. Our responsibility to care for our home so that our children's children, our nieces and grandnephews, will have some place that they can thrive and survive in. God is understood as the owner of the house, but God lives in this house as well and remains active in this house. There is a bad theological concept that really leads to a concept of throwaway, and we don't have to care for the earth because we're only visiting this planet. Well, if this is God's house and we're only visiting, we should be treating it as you would as a guest. Today's story in Exodus contains an interesting command by God. Everyone is to gather as much as they need, and each who followed God's command had just as much as they needed, not too much, not too little. But God also commanded that they consume what they take. Those who tried to save it for the next day had a mess. How many times as children did we hear, do not take more than you can eat? Or better yet, clean off your plate. Just food alone, so much is wasted. 40% of all food is thrown away or plowed over. In California alone, 100 billion pounds of food is discarded. Over 5 billion pounds of prepared food is thrown away every year. That's not prepared at home. This is industrially prepared food. In Exodus, God is teaching us to be more attentive to our ties to creation, to the world around us. We should be grateful for the abundance that creation offers and use it wisely. So I mentioned food waste, and did you know there's an app for that? As there is with anything else. Yes. Like many things in this world, there's an app for that. People are trying to make a difference. And so Waste No Food, and you can Google that, and that's the name of the website, has an app. Service organizations want access to excess food. Soup kitchens, anybody who's giving away meals, feeding the hungry on the streets. But there are barriers. In certain states, governments set up harder barriers than in others. But locating excess food is one of the biggest barriers, and this is resources where if you have the app, you can say, I have this much food left, and if you volunteer on the app, you can say, I'll go pick it up and get it to where it needs to go, to one of their partner organizations. Waste No Food breaks down all the barriers of transporting, getting the food to where it needs to be, and getting it distributed. And I know the app has partnered with some people in Tampa Bay. I couldn't find the list of all. But restaurant owners, if you know any, you might want to bring it up to them going, have you tried this app if you have excess food at the end of the day? Or maybe you want to volunteer to pick up food and get it to where it needs to go if we have partner organizations in the area and appropriate charities. Just one thought. I also read from Psalm 24 today. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world and those who live in it, for he has founded it on the seas and established it on the rivers. This affirmation establishes a theological basis for care of the earth because it doesn't belong to us. We're part of the whole system that belongs to God. It does not belong to human beings to extract whatever pleases us. It's under God's jurisdiction, not ours. Thus suggests that we should respect whatever belongs to the divine. The earth and all that is within it were established by God and should be treated with the utmost care since it comes from the Creator. We are part of the earth, granted. But in this psalm, we are not given power or dominion over creation. Rather, we are part of what God has created. And therefore, we're akin to all of creation. And we should be treating creation as our kin. The psalm is about entering into God's temple. And now at church, we know that church is not a building. And we'll say it many times over the years. But we need to live like our churches without walls. Our sanctuary is the community and the world around us. Though Psalm 24 focuses on the sanctuary of the temple, Norman Habel, who started creation, the season of creation, argues that we can perceive the sanctuary in broader terms. Quote, a fundamental way to allow God to reorientate us in worship, is to see earth rather than the walls of our own church building as our sanctuary. See the earth as our sanctuary. In this respect, as we worship, earth is for us a sacred space, a place where God is active and where God encounters us. And scriptures reveal God's presence permeating all creation and making it sacred. There's a hymn that says we are standing on holy ground that many people sing in church. But we really should be singing it outside of the walls of church. Every day, every morning, we are standing on holy ground. In Exodus, we encounter a bountiful God, Exodus 9, 7 through 8 says, each of you must give as you are made up your mind, not regretfully under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to provide you with every blessing. Every blessing in abundance. And so that, by always having enough of everything, you may share abundantly in every good work. The problem is, we're spoiled children. We don't share well. We have a bad habit of storing up all we can, especially here in the United States, keeping it for ourselves. The boy with the most toys wins. God truly has blessed us with an abundance through the earth and all of its bounty, but here God states that we are blessed abundantly that we might share abundantly, not waste abundantly. Quote, our capitalist culture promotes a socio-economic ideology which makes it an individual goal for increased accumulation and consumption. Humans need more than their neighbors. Now, and everybody has that attitude. I need more than them, and they think they need more than me. And there is never enough. Earth's economy is not without limits. And by living within limits, there are enough resources to share to meet everyone's need, but not humans' infinite greed. E.F. Schumacher argues for, quote, small is beautiful mode of economic living. Likewise, Sally McFain claims, quote, the good life is not having more and more, but enough. Enough of what? Not money as such, but what money can give people. Adequate food, adequate clothing, adequate shelter, education, medical care, creative and spiritual opportunities, fellowship, and leisure time and space. Take what you only need expresses a spiritual orientation and participation in Earth's economy of abundance that instructs us to do with the minimum and not with the maximum. Do with the minimum and not with the maximum. Levels of consumption exceed our needs. And we need to change and shift before the whole planet dies from ecocidal attractive economies that ignores the resources limitless of the earth. Actually, the resources we know of the earth are not limitless. Unless we're using contemporary new ways of collecting energy. That's about the only thing that's limited. The sun, the wind, water power. Yeah, it might cost a bit more to use those, but those are limitless. And as technology gets better, hopefully we'll achieve that better economy for those. We as the UCC proclaim an open table here. All are welcome and all share equally in the bread of life. And we do not come to the table and take a whole loaf of bread on our Eucharist Sundays. That would be ridiculous. If we think of the world as our sanctuary, then the earth itself is God's table, and though that table is abundant, we should treat it with respect and frugality that we treat the Eucharist. Ethnobotanist and indigenous author Robin Hall Kermer claims that there are consequences to comprehending the earth as gift, which is some of the odd thinking that we've had for years. But when everything became a gift, he says, I felt self-restraint instead of just more gifts. I didn't want to take too much. A sense of gratitude of the natural world produces self-restraint. And similarly, Sir Wendell Berry notes, it is more than likely that we will have to live with limits, or not at all. Say that again. We'd have to live with limits, or eventually we won't be living at all. And that's not individuals, that is the human race. The planet will go on without us, and I think the planet might be happy to do so. The Creator Spirit supplies the seed to the sower and the bread for food with multiply abundance for all life by restraint and only taking our fair share. This frugality arises only as intentional spiritual practice of loving God, loving God's creation, and respecting God's sanctuary. In love, we often make self-sacrifices for our loved ones. If we love God and God's earth, we will make sacrifices of love for others. We might realize the truth of Jesus' feeding stories, such as the 5,000, where many interpret, each person shared what they already had. That was a true miracle. And when they were done, there was an abundance of leftovers. Amen.